Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Retirement interview series with experts. I'm Dorian Mintzer, your host and owner of revolutionizeretirement.com. So I want to proceed and move ahead today and welcome a wonderful guest, George Kinder. George has actually been part of my call a number of years ago. Kinder is an author and international thought leader. He's known in the financial industry as the father of life planning. He's authored 3 books on money as he revolutionized client-centered financial advice through all of his experiential trainings for thousands of advisors from over 30 countries across 6 continents. He's a mindfulness teacher and has been a mindfulness teacher for 35 years and author of the mindfulness primer, Transforming Suffering into Wisdom. He's led weekly meditation classes and residential retreats around the world. You can learn all about him and all of these retreats if you go to his website, which he'll mention and you'll have access to. Kinder's a published poet and photographer, including his illuminated manuscripts, A Song for Hannah and Reflections on Spectacle Pond, a 5-volume book of hours for each day and each week of the year, inspiring us to live in the present moment and discover the present moment in nature. And he'll mention, and I will be asking him about something you could sign up for so that you get these weekly reflections. I so enjoyed them myself. His recent books focus on civilization, understanding civilization as both human evolution and as the evolution of environments of freedom. His passion is to help create a civilization that organically fosters the very best of humanity as it diminishes the very worst. George and his wife Kathy have 2 daughters and they reside in Massachusetts, but they also spend several months each year in London and in Maui. And George is calling us from Maui today. So, without further ado, welcome, George. I'm so delighted to have you be with us. I am a follower and an admirer of yours, and also was part for many years it's a group of financial planners and non-financial planners. And I think I've even said this to you when I was at a life planning network event where you spoke about the civilization, the golden age of civilization. I'm getting the name of that wrong, and I used over the years your 3 questions and much of your life planning approach. So I think very highly of you. So welcome. And your new book just recently came out. How are you doing? And how are you feeling about this new book? Let's just start with that.
I'm thrilled. I can't. And first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Dory, for inviting me back. I remember our interview a few years ago with great fondness. And so it's just wonderful to be back and be able to cover this wide range of topics that the book touches on. Sometimes I think authors feel very busy, and I'm just thrilled with what's happening now with the book. And I think the main thing that I've been excited about is that the area around civilization that feels most compelling in many ways to us these days and most troubling is evolving into a bit of a movement, and with people participating in one way or another from many parts of the world. It's one of the wonderful things about today's communications and being able to be, whether it's on 90% of humanity has an iPhone, and here we are, you and at least that's where I'm calling in from. And then you have Zoom doing the videos and all of that. So it's just been wonderful to think that maybe there's a way to make the world an incredible place, a really incredible place.
Oh. I have to say, I love your optimism. I was just mentioning to George when we just first came on the call that when we scheduled this a number of months ago, I never knew we would be quite where we are right now, at least in our country, in the U.S. I don't know how if you are calling in from other places around the globe, but it's very timely and it as I was reading it, it did make me think a lot about how a movement like this can happen and take shape, but we'll get to that. But tell people more about it. The title of the book is The Three Domains of Freedom. Each moment is yours, your life is yours, civilization is yours. And I know you divide it in those three sections. What inspired it and what's it about?
I think in a way you touched on it earlier when you were describing the different works that I've done over the years. You were describing, as you were doing my bio there, I was just like stunned. Wait a minute, have I done all that? And the range of freedom is what really has driven my passion from early on in my life and professionally. And this is where you and I first, in some ways, encountered each other. Professionally, I was in the financial advice movement, and I was passionate there that the secret was not about money. It was really about freedom. And one of the reasons I think you and I connected was revolutionize your retirement. That's it, isn't it? Let's go there. And let's make our retirement really something extraordinary, or our life. And I work with people who are in all ages and categories. So the passion for freedom has been very strong for me. And the book, in a way, summarizes the three areas that I've focused on: the professional area of delivering freedom to people in their life. That's the second domain of freedom. Your life is yours. Let's make sure that really happens and you live an inspiring and passionate life and a profound life, one of great meaning. And my passion there, and I've taught people in 30 countries, is that it works everywhere if we really focus on who we want to be to live that kind of life. But all my life, I've also been a meditator and a practicer of mindfulness. And there's a different domain there. If you know the different areas, of course, many people try mindfulness and they go, oh gosh, I can't do this. I'm all thumbs. It's worse than trying to play the piano for people who have trouble with that. And so they abandon it. But of course, in a way, the secret to mindfulness practice is that those challenging moments, those difficult moments where we want to just quit, are the most important moments in any meditation, because they're our cutting edge and they're where we're learning things. And mindfulness fundamentally is about the mastery of the present moment. And if you think about it, we don't live anywhere else. That's really, and I have a trick question I ask many audiences, which is, have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past, walking the beach, making love, doing something really wildly creative, playing with your kids? And I get everybody to raise their hand. And then I say, I told you it was a trick question and you all got it wrong, because none of us have ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past. We've only ever experienced it in the present moment. So the present moment it's a different realm of freedom from the trajectory of our life, the meaning of our life story, which is what life planning is about. But obviously it's terribly important. And then the third domain of freedom is the one you alluded to in your comments about where we are right now in the world. And that is that civilization. And I think we all know, and we probably were all told as kids, that as a democracy, we're the ones that make the decisions, really. And we should be, and we're meant to live in freedom. And I began to realize over the last, really since the banking crisis of 2008, and then the political themes that have arisen over the last 15 years or so, that people are questioning whether they can live in freedom or not. And they're questioning the political system and they're questioning everything. There's a lot of distrust toward our institutional life. And I realized that, no, we're meant to live in freedom. This is what the human species, how can we be sustainable as a human species without that? And so I went back to the basics on how do you celebrate the freedoms that we have. Here we are, you and I, talking across the whole planet and to people from all over. And what an incredible thing that is. And so many freedoms we have, and yet we're troubled. And so I also go at, why is that happening? And is there a quick and easy, and I don't mean any change in civilization is going to have tumult to it, but is there a solution that we can see in a very simple way? And I think there is. And that's what that third domain of freedom is all about.
That's really helpful. Let me, before I ask another question, just mention to those who may have come on late, welcome. And please know that everybody is muted except for George and myself and my assistant. If you want to ask questions or have comments, please go to the event page and put down who you are and what the question is. And George has graciously agreed that a copy of the 3 Domains of Freedom will be sent to the best questioners judged by me. I realized I didn't say that right at the beginning for those of you who came on late. I just wanted to mention that. So back to the book and back to, we'll get to the 3rd domain, but I thought it'd be really helpful. You, as I mentioned in the introduction, you divided the book into these 3 domains, and each builds on the other. At least I feel that way as I was reading it. Can you maybe tell us about, just elaborate a little bit more on these 3 domains? Yeah. For example, if we start with the first one, how does mastering the current moment help? How do we do it? What are ways? And again, I'll mention to people he mentions practices and stuff, but I'd like you to talk and explain more about how one tries to do this and what you mean by mastering the current moment.
Great question, Dory. And I will say, just as a frame for this, that the reason that I put them into 3 domains, these realms, is that there's a way in which you feel that the present moment has nothing to do with, kind of democracy or civilization or your own trajectory in life. And I realized that the best way that I have managed to live in freedom in a present moment on a daily basis and all of this is to actually move back and forth between the domains. So the present moment is the one that's here all the time. And it's most of the time we feel pretty good about our lives. I think most people are more happy than not. And so that's a wonderful thing. But those moments where you're not happy, what do you do? And things happen. As free as you might feel, the pipes freeze in winter, or the election goes in a way that you're not happy with, or you have an argument with a dear friend, or your kids aren't working out their lives so well. So there are all kinds of things that pull us, and they can pull us just in the moment. And the interesting thing about mindfulness is widely talked about and scientifically studied these days. So you can read about it in Google all the time, and learn basic practices for it. The most basic one is just going back to closing your eyes, sitting quietly, and returning to feeling the sensations of your breath. And so every time it's not about staying with the breath, because time keeps changing and it changes discreetly, not just continuously. So every time you're called away, you simply return. You might think it'd be a really easy thing to do, but it's in fact very difficult. And even for me, after 50 years of doing it, and often several hours a day, it has its challenges. But what it delivers is extraordinary freedom. And the way that I can describe that freedom most easily for all of us is think about the wonderful times you have in nature. Think about walking on the beach. Think about taking a walk through the woods or in the fields, or even just stepping outside from your home. How amazing it is that nature's contact with you. It's immediate, it's fresh, it often delights. We have to bundle up in winter and that kind of thing and protect ourselves from the sun in summer, but most of the time it's just delightful. And if we really dive into it, which was what all of my books of photography and poetry were about, if you really dive into the wonder of it and the awe of it and the present moment of it, that's what mindfulness delivers. But it delivers it to us in a more systematic way throughout our lives, so that we don't have to be in nature and be free to have that walk. We can do it even in daily challenges. So I hope that's helpful around the present moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. I have a question, because what I have found really helpful too is really focusing. I think I learned it maybe about 40 or plus years ago when I was learning hypnosis, based, I think, on Herb Benson's thing of just, so like once an hour. I started doing it in between appointments, and now it's just part of my life. So about once an hour, I just do 2 to 3 really deep breaths in through my nose, out through my mouth, and some self-reflective, silent sort of comment to myself that centers me. And I have found over these 40-some years, all my clients do that too, in addition to many do meditation and all. But I really find, and just wondered your thoughts, I just have found for myself that centering, and the more I do it, I find it so helpful because it grounds me. It helps make that difference between acting and reacting. And I've been particularly finding it helpful dealing with some of the current realities of life, winter, politics, health and issues, all of that. So I just wondered what your thoughts are of just even the focus on the centering with breathing and how that can be something that we're able to do just in a few seconds, multiple times during the day, eyes open or closed.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you're doing, Dory. And I'd forgotten that Herb had done that particular technique, but I love it. And as you were saying it, I just did it, and wow, cool. And I think that it's a good talk about it centering you and grounding you in a way. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, I talk about mindfulness and these meditative practices as being practices toward the mastery of the present moment. And what we don't realize is that so much of the kind of the trouble of our life comes because we are, as you say, reactive rather than being here and open and equanimous or patient or kind in the moment. We react. And the more we do this kind of practice, and your 40 years really evidence it, the more we do this kind of practice, what's extraordinary is the better listeners we are. And in my work in life planning, I teach financial advisors. The primary thing I teach them, they think I teach them how to inspire their clients, but primarily I'm teaching them how to listen. And mindfulness is one of the great ways to learn listening, because the only way you can really be present with that breath is to let your reactivity go and to let your emotions be in a way. So wonderful.
Yeah, no, and the noticing, the paying attention, the noticing, being still, all of those things are just so important. Let's shift a little then to the second realm that you call your life is yours, the life planning. Can you maybe elaborate a little more on that? And you have been the father of financial planning. And even, I must say, as a non-financial planner, as I said earlier, your approach has influenced me as a non-financial planner. And I maybe help people know a little about what financial planning is, or what life, not even financial, but what is life planning? How can one live the best life that we have, and knowing that it's more than just money? It's money, but more than money.
Yeah. The thing that was really interesting was that most of us anyway, have to make a living, and I had to make a living and find my way in the world. And I just fell into, in a way, I was skilled with numbers, and I fell into tax advice and then financial planning. But my passion was always toward freedom in a way, and personally, I was passionate about the arts and about the meditative world and spiritual life. So it was stunning to me that I found myself in the financial planning world and ultimately a leader in that world, because I identified what a lot of the great financial advisors already were thinking, which is, hey, this really shouldn't be about selling products or doing spreadsheets. This really should be about using those skills or those elements to deliver our clients into freedom. And so I articulated a methodology for doing that. And I think the important thing is that many people, most of the clients that I had weren't living really lives of freedom, lives of great meaning. They weren't living their passionate purpose. And so what was wonderful was to come up with a method through listening and inquiry, and having a really great relationship with your client, where it's a really trusting relationship, which is unusual in the financial world. You might feel friendly, but you don't necessarily feel like I trust this person with anything. And so you build that relationship, and then through a conversation, it can be done fairly simply and relatively quickly even. once trust is developed, the client discovers how it is they'd really like to live as opposed to what's going on right now. And often it's very small tweaks, but what we do is we say, you deserve that life. And most often in the early days, the kickback from it, from the financial world, was you can't own an island in paradise and you can't have a mega mansion and live in multiple places and all these things. And the truth is that most of our passion for life isn't that grandiose, isn't filled with money. It's more filled with meaning and purpose about who we really want to be. And so anyway, so many people don't live their lives as their own. They live it as their parents told them to live it, or as their kids now tell them to live it, or as money seems to tell them to live it, or as their employer does, or as their health does. And what we do is we help people figure out what that incredible world would be, and then say, let's go for it. Let's make it happen. The frame for that, how it really works.
Great. And just to point out to people that in the book, you can learn about the frame of evoke, and the frame of the questions that he asks. And maybe we'll be able with questions to come back to that. But I do think it's important to shift. And already there's an important question that has come in that was linked to a question I asked. The third domain of civilization, but it ties in, I think, with your background and the notion of working with people to realize their best life and this concept of fiduciary. Can you maybe talk about the third realm, but also, because I know the concept of fiduciary is tied into what you mentioned before about this new movement that's developing and your notion of what potentially could happen. And so I just find it really fascinating to think about it in this concept about civilization. So can you talk about fiduciary and what the term is, how it relates to financial planning, but also how it relates to this third realm about civilization?
Yeah, fiduciary is, a lot of people don't know what it means, and they occasionally might see it in the news, but not that often. It's a kind of a legal term, and it's a term that's widely known in the financial world, also in the legal world. And what it really means is trustworthy. And if you are a fiduciary to someone, you put their interests ahead of your own. It's really that simple. So if you have a client and you're a financial advisor and you're a fiduciary toward them, their interests are more important than yours in terms of making a profit or whatever. You put their interests first. And it's controversial because primarily the sales companies, the product companies that are not fiduciaries, there are virtually no companies that are fiduciaries to everybody, to humanity or to the planet. They're fiduciaries to their shareholders. So the financial companies might have sales forces, and they are not fiduciaries to their clients. They have their first allegiance to their employer. So in the financial world, I think everybody wants a fiduciary. You want someone who puts your interests first, clearly listens to you. And I think there are three elements to it. There's the element of not charging you for a sale, but charging you a fee for a service. So that's important. And the second thing is that, so they're what are called fee only, not fee based, but fee only. And the second thing is that they're holistic. They aren't just product oriented around a product or two, but they really know saving and budgeting and all the ways that money impact your life, so that they're skilled in all of those things. So that way they can be a fiduciary to you around your whole money issues. And then the third thing is that they be real masters of life planning, so that they are great listeners and are passionate about your purpose in life. So the term comes from that world. And so, of course, that's the world that I've worked in. And I realized that it's such a strange thing. Here we are, very proud to be, so many of us, so very proud to be fiduciaries in the financial world. Why are there no companies that are fiduciary to their employees, to their customers, and to greater things, to the planet, to democracy, and to the truth, for heaven's sakes, as we talk about what's happening now? And I realized that you could do this very simply, but with a very simple piece of legislation, and that's in the book, and it's something I'm promoting right now, and it's part of this movement that's happening toward a fiduciary society. But isn't it strange that here we are as a human species, and we've put together this system of institutions where we don't require an institution, whether it's a corporation, a government, a nonprofit, to place the truth ahead of their own self-interest, or to place the planet ahead of their own self-interest. That's really strange. And it's time that it ended. It's not sustainable, as we can see with the troubles that are arising in society right now. A very simple solution to it is to require every institution as it gets organized in a formal way to have a fiduciary obligation to truth, democracy, the planet, and to people ahead of their own self-interest. So that's a simple version of it. Happy to go further. It's pretty exciting because I'm excited about it. I know we're in troubled times and everything, but we have come together as a species for the first time. We might not feel it yet. We might feel that there are 3 or 4 huge nation states that are grabbing for power and everything. But the truth is that 90% of us have smartphones, and we're connected with everybody all over the world. And this is only going to grow in our lifetime, in our children's lifetime. So as a species now, we can come together and make decisions. And this is one of the great things about democracy, how democracy has worked and how important it is. So civilization, I think, is the human species. It's who we are meant to be. So I think we should claim that and claim it in all the good ways that we know we all should be.
I keep hearing it and just wishing it were so easy. And let me integrate Thomas's from Arlington's question. He says, in the present political moment, it's very difficult to believe the election outcome and the now presidential executive orders that are showing our belief in democracy is challenged due to the freedoms that we were granted to us and what's in the process of being stripped away through fear, deregulation, things of taking away regulations of clean air, clean water, climate change, immigration. How do we continue to believe in democracy in our future, including financial independence? He says mindfulness yet, but what more and how?
Yeah.
So can you maybe comment on that? Because it relates to the questions I have too. I'd love your concept, but it's so hard for me to think now, just a week after the inauguration, how one can go about that when, in fact, so much is being stripped away, and it's not only totally non-fiduciary, but it's more the loyalty to a certain viewpoint, which is not necessarily the truth, and not a fiduciary responsibility to us as citizens. How does one enter that scene with the hopefulness or with hopefulness? But go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. It's dispiriting in so many ways. And that I will say that even if the election had gone in a different direction, the powers of the financial forces, the billionaire power, and the power over media has shifted in such a huge way over the last 40 years or so that it's unlikely that we could have made the changes that we want as a species and that we deserve and that are meaningful. So I'm as dispirited as we all might be. I think the real answer has not been in the political realm, but is in the realm of us, of humanity, of speaking out and of speaking to fellow human beings and of creating a grassroots movement that is compelling. And it's compelling not just here in Arlington and Boston and Maui and America, but all over the world, that we, as human beings, we know what is right, and to call out for a fiduciary society to really know what it is. That one of the problems that we've had politically is that we get pulled into fighting for this particular agenda or that particular agenda, and there's constant new things that occur. And what happens by being constantly pulled to new polarizations is that we don't see, as they say, the forest for the trees. So just step back for a moment and consider how this has come about. We've had 250 years of incredible growth. And And one of the ways that I've framed this for myself is, if that system that produced that growth was the best system, wouldn't we find the very best of humanity at the top of every hierarchy of power and filtering all the way down through it? And why is it that we don't? After 250 years of experiment, of entrepreneurial engagement, why wouldn't we find the best of humanity everywhere? And so clearly something's wrong at the base of the system. So rather than going out and fighting all these little fights, these skirmishes of money and power and truth and media and all of this, why not go to the base of institutional existence and just simply say, we miscast this moment in history. How could we not? We didn't know what would happen 250 years later. But we can see now that the economists call it negative externalities, that every corporate structure can have, often does have, some kind of negative externality to it, that when you bring everything to scale economically, you bring everything to a global scale, that those negative externalities will be there, will go to scale as well. So you have a pollution problem that could devastate the planet and looks like it's on the way to, and you have a truth problem now that is part of power holding what we call the free press, powerful forces. And you can, by a simple single sentence piece of legislation, if we gather together as a grassroots community and say, this is what we want, and we put it at the basis of every incorporation, we could solve this. And that I'll just say what it is, and I think you have it in your material. But it's a single sentence. It's that simple, and it could go across all cultures, with what I was trying to define. So here, a fiduciary standard of obligation is required for all institutions, corporate, nonprofit, and governmental, to place the interests of all stakeholders of truth, of humanity, democracy, and the living planet that sustains us first, above their own self-interest. And that's simple. How could we possibly imagine that a corporation could place their own self-interest ahead of the truth, or ahead of the planet, or ahead of democracy? That's clearly not what humanity wants, what any of us really want, except the people that have the greatest power, the billionaire class sitting up there on the dais. So I think that it is something, what I'm seeing is a gathering interest around it, and a movement beginning to gather. And that's what I'm most excited about in my life right now, is that I'm working with people from many different areas on how do we, A, get this to go viral, B, how do we bring this into institutional life right now? And that's what feels most important, as opposed to getting lost in the polarization of issues and politics. And not to say that it isn't terrible what's happening right now, that what we're seeing. But what I'm saying is that should galvanize us to do something about it. And instead of saying there's nothing I can do about it, the powers are so great, there's a very simple solution if we can make a grassroots movement around this idea.
No, I do hear that, and it's hard, particularly with what's going on with a lot of the corporations, that their fiduciary standard is to their shareholders, to think about how to get some of these billionaires to think about others and not just their own self-interest. So Tyson N from Oregon says, how would you enforce the legislation you're proposing? And I guess I would say that even more of just knowing that right now it's hard to imagine. I think they're two separate concepts I'm hearing. One is getting the grassroots organization support, but it's hard to imagine, at least in these coming couple of years, maybe if not more, how anybody would even think about the legislation. So let's go back to Ben's question. How would you enforce the legislation you're proposing?
I think the most important thing is the steps to accomplish this. Enforcement is one of the ways. It's important, and I'll talk about it. But the most important thing is the vision. That the vision, what we found in life planning was that people said, oh, I can't live the life that I want because of the mortgage or the kids or all these things. And And they had a list of many things of why they couldn't. But when you presented to them the vision of their life as they really wanted it, as they were passionate about, and you inspired them in that vision, they go, oh, well, I can do this. They got the energy together to make it happen. And I think the first thing really here is letting people know there is a simple solution. And let's promote it and make it happen. And as you make that vision universal, so that people are at least talking about it in different cultures all over the world, and certainly in different places and towns and organizations in America, as people begin to talk about it, there are going to be lawyers and politicians that are involved in that, and financial people, and they're going to be going, how do you do this and how do you do that? And they're going to begin to get to work at it. And that's just what we do as a species. We figure out what the problem is, and then we solve it. And already in terms of enforcement, one of the beautiful things that's been happening in the corporate world is something called the B Corp movement. It's sometimes called benefit corporations. And there are thousands of them now. I think there's 8,000 all over the world. There's, I think, over 2,000 in America. There's 2,500 in the UK, 2,500 in Europe. And what they do essentially is they take this message of fiduciary in all things, which I call FIAT. And their message is people, planet, and profit. And what I've added to that, which I'm very excited to be doing, is truth and democracy. Clearly, we need to include truth and democracy in the issue, but they have taken people, planet, and profit into all of these corporations so that the people and planet have to be on an equal footing with profit. And so they've already begun to figure out, how do we do this as a corporation? How do we make this happen? How do we make ourselves profitable? So it's these, and this has exploded just in the last 20 years. And it's really exploded. I think it's quadrupled in Great Britain in just the last 2 or 3 years. So there are movements like this that are beginning, and we need to gather them all together around something like fiat that puts it all in place and make sure that we're not fighting individual battles, but we're making the system work. The system doesn't work right now, and it's not sustainable. So we can do that. And that's where I'm headed. But it's the vision, I think, Dory, and your...
Yeah. That sounds important to keep in perspective. I'm going to integrate a couple more questions here and then keep on with the discussion about the movement. But Mary from California takes us back to the present moment part. And she said that she's reacting to the word of the word mastery. And she said the word mastery about the current moment to her doesn't connote freedom. Is there a more helpful word to use about the present moment? Learning or practicing that reflects a more positive relationship with the present moment. So it sounds like she's not hearing mastery as such a positive. It's not, as she says, it's not connoting freedom. Any thoughts on that, of another way of viewing it, another lens?
Yeah, I love what she's saying, and I agree. I think mastery works in certain areas, and I think that part of what I'm doing is taking it into the institutional world where they want mastery and things, and so I'm using their language just as I'm using their language with the fiduciary. But I think you could let go of that term and just recognize that the only place we experience freedom is in the present moment. One of the ways, Jory, you've read the book, and you know that one of the things I talk about is about how every moment, in a way, is already free. And this is a bit more complex philosophically, but every moment we live in the past and the future primarily, and we're divining how we're going to do the next hour or two and how we're going to do the next week or two. And what happened in the past is leading to this. And we completely forget you really are living in the present moment. And one of the things you realize as you practice more and more mindfulness is that the present moment is a realm of freedom. And each moment is born only to pass away. And that's not a bad thing. Impermanence is not a bad thing. It is an expression of how free it is, how spontaneous. And so maybe what I would say to Barry is read the book and see what you think. And I do use the term mastery of mindfulness, but I'm happy to let go of it and speak in other ways about it, because it's really the freedom there that's most important, as opposed to mastery. No. Yeah.
So Shifra from Massachusetts says, how do you recommend balancing day-to-day need for self-care with a need to work towards political systemic change? She says, I'm struggling with how to balance my day-to-day need for inner peace with a different need to contribute, to try to make a difference, i.e. to get ready for some kind of political action before midterms and or to work towards some system change like primary reform, oral ed, or your fiat notion.
Yeah. Oh, what a wonderful question. And Shifra, I love it. And I think that the question of balance is really important. And I think there are these three areas. And for me, the first thing I would do is that I would get life plans, or I would figure out how to life plan myself, so that I know that the primary trajectory of my life is one of great meaning and of passionate purpose, of great heart, or of creative engagement. And I'm just thrilled to be doing it. And that's the first thing that I would do. And because if you have that, you have the past and the future aligned in a way that makes sense to you personally. And you'll see where self-care comes in there, and also where a democracy or politics or working for change comes in. And once you have that grounding in that trajectory of your life, then I think looking at each of these other domains, looking at how do I get inner peace. And I love the mindfulness practice, and I love what Dory just taught us about the breathing that she's done for 40 years. And there are many different practices that can help you there. And I've written about one of them to try to strengthen you. And then the other piece about civilization, I think that's a very simple thing to find where you're most passionate about. And if it's the environment, if it's equal rights, if it's inequities, or if you are attracted to this idea that, hey, there's one thing that could actually take on all the institutions that are misleading us, which is this fiat or fiduciary and all thing movement, then do what you can in each of those, but find your own ground first. It's very important.
Really important point. And maybe comment, because I know some of your balancing too, and I think it's a great role model for people. You write poetry, you sing with your daughter, some of these things that emerged during COVID. Could you just share that? Because I think that's part of your balancing. Yeah. And your, I guess it's a weekly blog. I can't remember how often I get it, but maybe mention some of that, because I think that, and then we'll get back to how people can maybe understand more and get involved in this new movement.
Sure.
But what are some of the things you use for being in the present moment and balancing? And
yeah. Maybe the story of my daughter and I writing this album was quite incredible. And then I'll touch on the blog, which is poetry and photography, and exciting, wildly creative, and lots of fun. And so COVID comes along, right? And people don't realize it because I've got a lot of energy for what I do, but I've had long COVID for the last 5 years. I was one of the earliest victims of COVID, and the fatigue lasted with me. So I've learned to not master that, but to manage it in a way that has given me a lot of excitement, actually, because it got me focused on what's important, right? If you only have a limited amount of energy for a day, let's make sure it's really used for what's most valuable and most important. And so what happened in those early days of COVID was that first summer, my kids were 16 years old, and 2 16-year-old daughters bursting at the seams, so to speak, and wanting to be out there, and we had to stay home, right? And what am I going to do? What are we going to do? And I thought, let's do something wildly creative with each of them. And that was my passion. Kathy, my wife, was doing other things with them. But so what I did with one of my daughters, London, she's very musical, and she now leads an a cappella group in college. And I thought, I'd always wanted to write songs. And in the early days, I wanted to be a crooner of some sort and loved the romantic songs. And then as the 60s developed, Bob Dylan was a huge hero for me early on. And so I said, let's write an album together. And I was thinking, I'm going to teach her something about Bob Dylan and all this. And she was going, I like Taylor Swift and I forget, Harry Styles. And so we had these totally different styles coming together. And sometimes there was like no communication at all. And yet she put the music together. I put the words together, and we wrote a protest album. And we interact. I worked on the music some, and she worked on the language some. And you can find it on Spotify. And I think it's a compelling album. And we did it in 7 weeks. We did 7 or 8 songs that were really about autocracy and the problems that we're having with racism in the country at the time and COVID. It was incredible. So that's the only way that happened was because I've lived my life looking at how can I live a passionate life? How can I live the most meaningful life that I possibly can live? So when that challenge came up, I had both my own sense of passions and looking at what my daughter was passionate about and trying to find a way to merge it. It wasn't always easy, but boy, we'd really accomplished something, which I think we're both quite proud of. But the other piece that you were mentioning, I have on Substack. You can subscribe to it for free. And yeah, I mean, there are different layers to it, but I have on Substack, you get at least a weekly post. And what my mission, my legacy was not, I always thought of my legacy not as these 3 domains. I thought of my legacy as really putting together these illuminated manuscripts that would touch on how to live a more profound life of freedom in the present moment and in nature, and influenced by East and West culturally. But it took me 30 years to put together a book that has a 2-page spread of every single day of the year captured in photography and poetry, and every week of the year in a separate book. So the 5 books of that. And what I try to do in that book is inspire others to live profoundly in nature or to live a profound life of the present moment. So it was a delightful thing for me as I was also doing financial work. I structured my life so that my mornings were primarily about this creative life of freedom. And my afternoon and early evenings were the time when I did my work. And that's life planning, figuring out how to live your most meaningful life. Okay.
Such a beautiful example. Just say again how people can have access to these things. You mentioned the Substack, and why don't you mention what your website is too, and that people can find you and find some of these things.
So the website, I think, Dory, that you have in your link is the website to the Kinder Institute of Life Planning. So that's a website to the life planning community, which is fabulous because you can learn how to do it yourself and how to get help to be life planned. To find all the wild and crazy things that I've done with my life, the general website is just georgekinder.com. And on there, you'll find a link to the book that I wrote, the 5-volume book of photography and poetry is called Reflections on Spectacle Poems. And that will give you a link to my Substack, which is, as I say, you can do that for free, and you get a weekly a pair of photography, 2-page spread of image and poetry every week.
Wonderful. And it's wonderful. I can attest to that because I receive it. But great. Now back though so say more about fiat, this whole idea about fiduciary and all things. And because it does sound like when you're talking about the B corporations and things both in this country and elsewhere, just say more of how it's evolving, how people could get involved, and in what way you think, even with the current administration, how your movement or involvement in it can maybe work when so many guardrails are being taken down, and just truth and integrity and caring about the world, when at least in the present moment in our country, it doesn't seem to be working that way, which does to me make it seem even more important to focus on things like that. But so how has the movement been responding to the current moment, the present moment. And how does one get involved? What can people do to become part of it? Because maybe it's a way of not giving up hope and feeling like people can have an impact.
I think that's really the key. And if I'd let circumstances get in the way of my passion to do the book of photography and poetry or anything that I've done, I never would have done it. There were so many reasons against it. And I think that's also true for our ancestors who managed to create democracy, starting with Magna Carta way back, and have fought for civil rights and have all of those things. And it's just that we're at a time where we've got a different fight, and it's a new, and I hate to use the fight, but we have the term fight because it's a grand vision, I think, that we really have. And it's time for us to just simply say, this is our grand vision. And it's so easy for the media to polarize us, and it serves politicians to have us polarized. Then they get to choose one side or the other, and they will promote who they are or whatever. It's time for us to stand together, and that's why the great thing about the fiat movement. And it's modest at this point, but I've spoken probably hundreds of times in different interviews and about it, and been expanding it since the Golden Civilization conversation I think you and I had, Dory, a few years ago. And so you can get involved. There is a page, I think that one of the pages you link to on georgekinder.com, you can find a page called Fiduciary, and I think it's called Fiduciary in All Things. And that gives you some elements that you can incorporate right away. There are emblems that you can put on just look at the organic symbol, and we all know what it is. And to have a symbol that you have on your website that says, I believe in fiduciary in all things, becoming the law of the land. It's a little tiny symbol of the planet Earth. And it's a beautiful thing. Or the law itself, presenting that on your site. So you can stand for it just with your social media very easily, which is an incredible thing. And then once you've done it, you can just rest on your laurels there for a while. But I have both a support group and a steering committee that are actually trying to drive movements in different ways. And so they're trying to figure out how to make this go viral. And you're welcome to join those movements. And we do them on Zoom once a month, both the support group and you can find out information by going to the Fiduciary site or go by looking on my social media. If you look on my Facebook or LinkedIn, you'll find at various points different advertisements for the support group or the steering committee. But if you write to any of you can write to Kinder Institute, you'll find it. So pretty much if you engage, you'll find a way to, if you want to be part of this, we'd love to welcome you, obviously. And so there are other ways that I'm working. I'm working directly toward the B corporations to try to bring a workshop that brings their mission and the fiat mission together into corporations that have committed to people, planet, and profit.
So it sounds like there are many ways that people can connect and learn more, and through your website maybe is the best, but also LinkedIn and Facebook. It is interesting to try to think about I think I had another speaker who talked about the post-truth world in a sense that, how, and particularly now with so much of social media not having fact-checking, and it's just very hard. To me, it speaks so importantly of your work, for each of us coming back to that present moment, because that is probably the most ultimate of freedom we can have in terms of living and being in the present moment. And then, as you say, trying to use our own life planning or getting help to live the best life we can at whatever stage of life we're in, but then thinking about the greater whole. And I think, I can't speak for everybody on the call, but I think a lot of people on the call on some level really believe in this concept of fiduciary in all things, with the idea that it should be all of us. But as I think was said in one of the earlier questions, Thomas so many freedoms feel like they're being lost now. So it becomes even more important to claim our present moment.
Yeah. Right on. And the post-truth time, I think that gets us so riled up, and it should get everybody really riled up. And to say, hey, we insist on truth. We want truth. And if you're not delivering it, then let's make a movement to make it happen. And I think one of the ways I just thought of a pretty cool way that everybody could participate pretty much immediately is if you read the book and you get a feeling for what fiat really is. The book, it's a short book. I think it's profound. I think it's fun to read, but it's deep to read as well. But it's brief. I meant to write it as a book of wisdom. And as you get to the fiat portion, it builds into that. And once you understand that, what we've been encouraging people to do is have kind of kitchen table or dining room party conversations where you bring people over. It may just be 10 or 15 minutes at the end of a meal. You say, hey, and here's the central question. It's not because I forget who it was who was asking about how do you enforce it. The question is not so much how you would enforce it at this time. The question is, how would it change your life? How would your life be different if every institution that you encountered, our government, every corporation, was trustworthy and humane in everything they did? How would your life personally change? Don't get to the question of how yet. Let's make the vision so powerful. How would it change? And I think all of us would say, oh gosh, I mean, we did this with our 20-year-old daughters and a group of their friends. And what was stunning was a number of them said, for the first time, I could actually imagine having children. Okay, you think about how devastated they feel living in a dystopian world. They said, for the first time, I could imagine having children. And so it would be wonderful for all of us. We wouldn't be living with this angst that we're constantly feeling. How would it be to live in a world where every institution you encountered was trustworthy and humane in everything they did?
Which can bring a piece of calm. Thinking about something like that. But I think it's such a wonderful question to ask, and hopefully maybe will motivate people to come outside of the despair that I know I, as a therapist as well as a coach, and the amount of despair since November 5th, but more this past week, it's just palpable. I like your idea of the kitchen table or dining room table and having conversations, and that's such a lovely one. How would your life be different if government and all these corporations really were trustworthy and humane? Oh, what a beautiful thought. Any other, I thought all the questions were really good. Any final kind of comment or takeaway you'd like to make, George, before we say goodbye to everybody?
No, I think we can do this. It's the thing that I'd like to add, because we get somber around it all. I think we can do this. And one of the things that's wonderful about joining these groups, being in these groups, is that people share many inspiring things as well as many concerning things. And often we go from, what are your concerns? What are your worries? To, how are you engaging? What are you seeing that's inspiring? What are you doing that's different? And I think human species, look at all the things we've overcome over the years. It looks like a terrible time, but there's so many ways in which our ancestors lived much more difficult time than ours. Let's go for it. I'm excited. I'd love to join with you.
That's wonderful. I do want to say that Shifra says, please share this information with George. She's connected to trying to help a B Corps that she thinks could be of high value to you. Called PIE, purposeandexpenses.com, and you could contact, I'll share her email address with you if you'd like, George.
That would be fabulous. And Shifra, it may be, there's the person in our office who takes care of practically everything is named Laura Woodward, and I think her title is COO, and she may get back to you, and I may get back to you as well, but we'll be both engaged around PIE. That just sounds very exciting, Shifra. Thank you so much. And I loved your question. You touched on them, in a way, all three of the elements, which was wonderful.
Right. Yeah. Thank you again. And thank you all for being here, and stay well and safe. So thanks again, George, for taking time and being with us and sharing your wisdom and perspective. And you really are such a fabulous inspiration and role model to all of us. So thanks so much for joining us again. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.